All right, guys. Uh, your test, remember, is the next day that we come back, which should be Tuesday. Um, so again, we want to go through this for about 10, 15 minutes to go through everything that you need to know, remember, for your exam on Tuesday. Now again, chapter 1 is the introductory chapter. There's the basic stuff to anatomy and physiology. And again, obviously, we talked a little bit about it, history, right? The fact that people, when they first started looking at anatomy and physiology, was primarily dealing with illnesses and treating injuries and things like that. How can we stop those things? And we started through centuries building up a better system of how to figure out what's going on with the human body. And remember that today all of our medical terminology, all our terminology with anatomy and physiology is primarily in Greek and mostly in Latin. Okay, that's why we said that this is a language kind of class. If you can understand the language, a lot of these big words that you'll see later on make sense because they're pretty straightforward. Okay, now we said that anatomy was the structure, right? The body parts themselves, whereas physiology is, again, how the body parts function. So remember, structure determines function, anatomy determines physiology. Okay, always keep that in your mind. Now, we also said that there were things as far as the human body that would tell us that we're alive, characteristics of life. We said there were 10 of them, right? And these 10 are pretty straightforward. There's a few of them that are kind of squirrely that you don't really understand a whole lot, but if you take a look at them, they're not that difficult. Like, for example, movement. Remember, we've got to be able to move if we're a living thing. Either moving physically or internally stuff is moving around, and human beings do both, obviously. Responsiveness, we got to be able to react to external and internal stimuli that's going on inside of our body, as well as what's going on outside of us. Otherwise, we won't survive very long. We have to be able to do that. We're going to grow. Obviously, we weren't born this out. We started off really small and grew over time. We still physically grow. All right. Reproduction, we produce new cells all the time. We're producing millions upon millions of new cells every day. But we also have the ability to reproduce new offspring, create new organisms from us, right? And that's a characteristic of a living thing. And the fact that we use oxygen and remove carbon dioxide, respiration. We breathe in, we breathe out, and that's how we, again, survive, because we have to have oxygen for a lot of chemical reactions in our body to take place. We also have digestion. We have to take food in, break it down into simpler parts. Then we absorb those materials, right? Or we absorb oxygen, same thing, basically. We also circulate, we move those materials through our body, and we also assimilate, we convert them into new things. Remember I said it was kind of like Legos, when you pull apart a big thing that's of Legos and you pull them apart and you rebuild something brand new out of it? Well, that's what we do every time we eat something. Then we excrete stuff, right? We release our wastes because, again, we can't keep waste inside of us because it will do damage to us. And again, we said that all 10 of those create our metabolism, all the chemical reactions in our body that take place create our metabolism, okay? Then we said, well, if you're going to be a living thing, there's 5 things that you have to have all the time, right, in order to continue to be alive. That would be water. Again, we're 70% water, so you don't have any water, you're in trouble. Food, go without eating for about a month and you'll find out real quick you need food to survive. Oxygen, you can't go but a few minutes without oxygen at most. You have to have it for all those reactions in your body. Heat, when we move and do things, our body creates heat. The chemical reactions in our body create heat, we have to have heat. And then we have to have pressure. Air pressure, for our lungs, breathing in, breathing out, blood pressure, all kinds of things to move materials, again, through our body. And if we don't get that pressure, we stop functioning as well. Okay? So those are some of the requirements of living things. Now, after we got through with that, we talked about the fact that we have to maintain everything. And again, all those things that we mentioned, those characteristics of life, if they get out of balance, we're in trouble, right? So we have to maintain a stable internal environment. Like we said, body temperature, blood pressure, blood sugar, salt balances, things like, there's all kinds of things that inside your body have to be maintained. Otherwise, you're going to run into problems. So again, that's what we have to do with that. Now, again, we said that the human body is divided, because now we're going to talk about, remember we talked about the different sections of the body, and we said that the body is broken down into two basic parts. It's the appendicular versus axial portion of the body. You remember the appendicular are your arms and your legs, right? And then the axial is basically your head, chest, and abdomen, all this right here. The parts you can't live without and the parts that you can live without, right? Now, we said inside of those you have different cavities, especially the axial portion is where we have the cavities. These cavities hold, for the most part, organs, right? And we have two big ones, the dorsal, which is the back side, and the ventral one, which is the belly side. The dorsal has two, the cranial, where your brain is at, and then the vertebral, which is where your spinal cord is at, right? And those are two pretty important organs. And on the front side, you have the ventral cavity has the thoracic cavity and the abdominal pelvic. Now, the abdominal pelvic can be broken down into abdominal and pelvic. The thoracic can be broken down into the two pleural cavities, heart, your lungs on either side, and in the center, the mediastinum, is where your heart, your trachea are located. Okay? So again, these two are the dorsal, these are ventral, abdominal pelvic, thoracic, abdominal pelvic, mediastinum, pleural. Okay? Okay. Pretty, again, straightforward. So that's what this says up here. We already went through that. Then we said there's some smaller ones like your nasal cavity, your oral cavity, your inner cavities, your orbital cavities for your eyes, right? Those are the smaller ones in your head. Okay. Of course, remember that each one of those cavities has, especially in the thoracic and abdominal pelvic, they have membranes, tissues that line inside. Okay. The ones in your lungs, that's called pleura. And there's parietal, which means it's lining the actual cavity, and visceral, which is lining the actual organ itself. So you have visceral pleura around the lungs, and then parietal pleura around the cavity. Okay. Then the heart has pericardium. You have parietal, which is a big sac around the parietal pericardium, which is a big sac around the whole thing, and then the heart itself has something called visceral pericardium. Okay. Then the abdominal pelvic cavity has peritoneum, and again, visceral and parietal peritoneum. Okay. All right. We talked about the different kinds of body positions. We talked about superior, inferior. Remember, superior is towards the head. Inferior is away from the head or towards the bottom. Anterior is front. Posterior is back, towards the front, towards the back. Right. Medial is towards the middle of the body. Lateral is away from the middle of the body. Right. Proximal, distal, your attachment to your body. Proximal is closer. This is distal, right? Distal, proximal. And then obviously the last two, superficial and deep. Superficial means right on the surface. Deep means obviously deeper, right? And again, straightforward, easy. You just got to remember some of these words that are kind of like, I've never really heard these words, but a lot of you probably have. Now, we said that the body was divided into 3D, 3 dimensions. Remember X, Y, and Z? And you can take the body and divide it this way, sagittally, right? You can divide it into left and right halves. You can also divide the body into upper and lower, right? That's called transverse, upper, lower. And then you can divide the body coronally, which means front to back. You can divide it in a front half and a back half of the body, okay? And that gives you your 3 degrees, this way, and this way, right? Gives you your 3 dimensions, okay? So again, same thing here, sagittal, transverse, coronal. Pretty straightforward. Okay. We talked about the regions. Remember this one? The 9 regions of the abdominal pelvic cavity. Umbilical is easy because that's where your belly button's at, right? Epigastric is above the stomach because there's the stomach right there, or on top of the stomach. Hypogastric means below the stomach. Right and left lumbar, that's your lower back. Right here, iliac, right and left iliac. Remember the big earlobe part of your hip is called the ilium. And then right here, the right hypochondriac and the left hypochondriac. Remember the word hypochondriac means below the cartilage. So right up under here, under your rib cage, all that cartilage right here, that's what we're talking about, okay? So again, pretty straightforward. It's just got some big words, but remember, the big words, when you break them down, mean something very straightforward and easy, okay? Then we talked about all these different regions of the human body. And again, some of them are easy, sternal, umbilical, abdominal. Some of them are hard, like acromial, right? Buccal maybe, right? But these, again, you just got to know them. Now again, half of them are pretty straightforward, right? Because you've heard them before. Same thing here with the backside. I mean, vertebral, right? Dorsal, lumbar, gluteal, femoral, where your femur bone is at, right? And some of them you just got to know. Okay, they're just pretty hard to understand. Like curl, remember we said we didn't. That was kind of one that didn't make sense to you. Whereas plantar, the bottom of your foot, where you plant your foot down. Okay. All right. We talked about the different systems. There were 11 systems. The integumentary, that's your skin and all those glands, right? You've got the skeletal, bones, protect you, hold you up. You got muscles, help you move, create body heat. You've got integration and coordination. This is your nervous system that figures out what the heck is going on around you. Same thing with your endocrine system, all those hormones, those glands that your body has. Okay. Then we had transport. Well, that was the cardiovascular, right? Pumping blood through the body, as well as the lymphatic system. Lymph fluid, lymphatic vessels, all that kind of stuff. Moving excess tissue at the body. Then absorption and excretion. There were 3 of those. The digestive, obviously. The respiratory, every time you breathe in and out, right? And then the urinary, getting rid of urine, urinary waste, cellular metabolic waste, actually. Okay? Those are absorption and excretion. And then finally, obviously, was the ability for reproduction, right? And again, we said that there are 2 reproductive systems. There's the male reproductive system, there's the female reproductive system. And again, the female is more complicated because of what it actually has to do, how much it has to all the different jobs that it has to continue with. This thing right here, the male reproductive system, is basically producing sperm and delivering it out, right? That obviously is producing hormones as well, but you know, that's much simpler than the female one. Okay? And then the last thing we talked about was the different ologies, the different applied sciences or medical appliances, right? Like cardiology or neurology or pediatrics or all the obstetrics, or all those that we mentioned that are at the very back of chapter 1. There's a list there, and we didn't go through every one of them, right? I gave you 24 of them. I think there's like 28 or so. There's several, maybe even 30 of them. I don't remember right off the top of my head. But I left off several of them because I didn't like them, and you won't see them a whole lot. I primarily picked the ones that you would be the most likely to see or hear about, okay? So you need to study those. If you have any questions whatsoever, you need to come and get on your your email and email me the question. I'll be looking Friday, I'll be looking Saturday and Sunday and Monday if you have any questions on it, because test is Tuesday if we come back on Tuesday, right? So make sure that you have any questions, you ask. It doesn't hurt to ask, okay? Just ask, all right? We'll see you hopefully Tuesday.